Hello and welcome to another video where I will be taking a deep dive into three of the most interesting fights taking place this weekend at UFC on ESPN Plus 22. As ever, we will be diving into these fights and taking a look at them from a betting perspective to see if there are any decent betting opportunities. And I also want to do a business deal with you guys. If this video gets 350 likes, I will drop another one of these videos featuring the main event between Blachowicz and Jacare. So if you want another one of these breakdown videos this week, hit the like button below and I will drop it as soon as we hit that 350 like target. And my research for UFC is going to be a little bit disrupted this week. I'm not going to be able to bring you as many breakdowns as usual because it's a strange week where we've got a Bellator card right smack bang in the middle of the week. If we take a look, we've got Bellator 234 Karatonov versus Lyndon Vassell tomorrow night, which is going to be a Thursday night event. It's going to be broadcast from Israel at a strange time, so it's kind of very weird. We don't get many midweek Bellator events, but this is going to disrupt my research for UFC, which means I'm going to be researching the majority of these UFC fights later on in the week, which means I'm probably going to be crazy busy and not have too much time to bring you videos. However, I will be live streaming my entire research process for Bellator 234 on Twitch. So if you want to watch me research these fights live, check me out, twitch.tv/Diary of a Pro Gambler, and I will leave a link to my channel in the description below. And I am hoping that we can find some decent bets on Bellator 234 because we hit a decent winner last week on Bellator 233. We took a small 1-unit gamble on Arlene Blenko to beat Leslie Smith. She came through for us in a big way, and of course if you would have been watching that Twitch live stream, you would have been involved in the whole research process. It was really cool to break that fight down, dive into it, research it and analyze it from a betting perspective with you guys. And what was really cool about this bet is that even though it was a very high risk bet, I think we had like 80 or 90 people watching us on the live stream, and basically everyone agreed that Blenko was a good bet based on what we saw together. Don't think anyone was picking Smith to win after we researched the fight. So that was a really cool experience. I enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into Bellator 234 with you guys in just an hour or two. Basically, as soon as I'm done uploading this video, we will be jumping into this. So if you're watching this video shortly after shortly after this video was uploaded, head over to my Twitch channel. There's a good chance I'll be streaming live. And now let's get into the first fight that I want to talk about, which is going to be Charles Oliveira versus Jared Gordon. Now, I am one of these guys that, I've watched so many MMA fights over the years. I watch hundreds of MMA fights a week, and I've seen it all when it comes to MMA. And, one of the great things about being so experienced, watching so many fights, is that you understand that there is so much risk with every bet. You'll never get a bet that ticks every box, and there is so much danger with every single bet that you place. So we look at a guy like Charles Oliveira this weekend. He's the biggest favourite on the card. He's currently around about a 1.28 favourite, which is minus 357 for an implied probability of 78%. There was a time before USADA came into effect where I regularly used to bet fighters at these kind of odds, because pre-USADA fighters were very, very consistent. You very rarely saw fighters underperform. If you research them, generally speaking, 8 or 9 times out of 10, they would always show up and perform how you'd seen them perform in the past. Whereas post-USADA, for a variety of reasons that I won't go into in this video because it's too big a topic and I don't want this video to be super long, but after USADA came into effect, it just basically led to fighters performing inconsistently much more often. And what I mean by that is, you might research a fighter, spend 2-3 hours researching a fighter, and then when they show up to perform on fight night, they won't perform anywhere near how you expected them to because of various issues that may have affected their training camp, weight cut, all kinds of things, right? There are a lot of ways that USADA impacted the fight game. So pre-USADA, these kind of bets were a cash cow for me. But post-USADA, I learned that it was just very hard to be profitable on these kind of bets. So since USADA came into effect, I haven't placed many of them. And, you know, if you've been following me since I set up this YouTube channel, usually I will dismiss favourites at these kind of odds quite quickly. However, when I researched this fight, I could see quite quickly while Charles Oliveira was the biggest favourite on the card, because when you study the fights of Gordon and Oliveira, it doesn't take you long to see that Charles Oliveira is just simply significantly better than Gordon in every single aspect of MMA. You know, when it comes to striking, Oliveira is light years ahead of him, which is very interesting because Oliveira's obviously his biggest strength is his grappling. But Oliveira over the last 2 or 3 years has developed really solid Muay Thai. You know, very, very, very good kicks. Does a good job of pressuring his opponent. He's got decent boxing too. He's great in the clinch. And of course, because when he faces his opponents, they're so worried about defending against the threat that he brings with grappling, it kind of shuts down their striking offense, which opens up more opportunities for him when it comes to striking. A really great example of this was Charles Oliveira's recent fights against David Timur. You know, David Timur is a very, very technical Muay Thai practitioner, a Muay Thai specialist, great Muay Thai kickboxer, superb technique, you know, crisp, technical, fast, throws a wide range of strikes. And yet, in this matchup, Charles Oliveira completely outclassed him when it came to striking. And I believe a big reason for that was David Timur was so worried about being taken down that he couldn't open up and let his hands go. He was scared to throw kicks. You know, if Timur fought Oliveira in a straight up K1 kickboxing match, he would probably destroy Oliveira, but that threat of the grappling really shuts his opponent's striking offense down. So, you know, Oliveira has a huge advantage over Jared Gordon when it comes to striking, and also it goes without saying that the advantages that Oliveira has on the ground are enormous, and where we've seen him make improvements to his striking, he's also made really good improvements to his offensive wrestling. And you know, Gordon doesn't have very good takedown defense. If Oliveira wants to get this fight to the ground, he should be able to. But more often than not, Oliveira likes to stand and strike with his opponents, and then he waits for them to try and take him down to alleviate, you know, the pressure striking that he brings to the table, and then he'll catch him in a scramble and put him in a bad position on the ground. And the ground is really where Jared Gordon's going to be in a lot of trouble here, because if you go back and watch his past fights, you know, particularly his last fight actually against Dan Moret, you'll actually see that he makes a lot of critical positional mistakes on the ground. If you really understand MMA grappling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you'll see some big issues in Gordon's ground game that Charles Oliveira can exploit. You know, one of the most obvious that you can go and check out for yourselves is just watch how often Gordon gives his back up when he's on the ground, even when in dominant positions. And of course, if you give a guy like Charles Oliveira a fraction of a second to take you back, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So this is a very, very good fight for Charles Oliveira, and he deserves to be a big favourite. You know, quite a lot of the time, you know, with these kind of bets, where we've got a guy at odds of around 1.28, I'd say, you know, this guy commands an implied probability of 78%, so you've got to cap him at around 83, 84% to get any kind of value here. But I actually think it's kind of fair to cap Oliveira in this ballpark, and it's very rare you'll hear me say that. You know, if you have followed my channel for a long time, or if you've been one of the a member on my website for a long time, I will almost always tell people to pass on these kind of bets. But Oliveira is a guy that is going to be safe, I think, to put into parlays. That, you know, if you really did want to fire off a big straight bet on him, you know, maybe $500, $1,000 to win an easy, you know, $250, $300, I'd be surprised if he lost. There was a point in time where I would never recommend betting a guy like Charles Oliveira as such a big favourite, because in the past, let's be real, Oliveira has been very flaky. You know, we've seen him quit in the past. He kind of quit against Paul Felder, kind of quit against Anthony Pettis, kind of quit against Lamas and Max Holloway. But whatever happened to him in the last couple of years, seems like he's really turned a corner, and he's looked absolutely outstanding, and he's just getting better and better with every fight. And I mean, a guy like Oliveira has been around forever. I mean, his first fight in the UFC was all the way back in 2010, when this guy was just 20 years old, and now he's only 30 years old. You know, we think about a guy like Oliveira, who's been around forever. But it's important to remember that he's still very young, hasn't even hit his athletic prime yet, and he's getting better and better and better. So I think that the Oliveira that we have in 2019, very different from the Oliveira that we saw quit back in 2017 and 2016. A lot can change with a young fighter in that space of time. And of course, in the past, Oliveira's had big problems making the featherweight weight limit, whereas, since moving up to lightweight, he's looked absolutely great. So yeah, I think Oliveira is a very, very safe bet this weekend. But obviously, it's not enticing to bet on a big favourite like this. So I don't actually know what I'm going to do with him. When it comes to bets like this, I don't really have that much interest in betting him straight. I don't want to bet a huge chunk of money to get quite a small return. Because with any bet, there's tons of risk. You know what I mean? Like Charles Oliveira might go out there, throw a leg kick and snap his leg in half, Anderson Silva style, right? He might get flash KO'd. Anything can happen. But because Jared Gordon doesn't carry much power in his hands, because he poses no threat to Oliveira on the ground, there's no way Gordon outworks Oliveira, because he can't survive on the ground with him with the mistakes he makes, and he's not particularly dangerous standing. So a flash KO is so unlikely. It's so unlikely Gordon does anything to Oliveira on the ground. Like any bet can lose. There's risk with any bet, but it's so fucking unlikely that Oliveira loses this fight. It really is a checkmate match, and what I mean by that is a checkmate match is where a fighter simply has the advantage basically everywhere, and he's not going to lose unless something crazy happens. That's what I would categorize this matchup. So haven't decided what I'm going to do with him yet. He's perfect for parlays to bump the odds a little bit. I hate passing on situations like this where it feels like it's free money because you're leaving money on the table. At the same time, I don't like to risk huge chunks of money for a small reward. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you're all big boys and girls watching this. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Take the advice and the information I've given you and use it as best you can. Personally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find another relatively safe bet this weekend, be that on either Bellator or the UFC, to parlay Oliveira into, to put him into an accumulator with someone. Haven't found anyone yet, but I'm going to keep digging. That's personally how I'm going to play it. But maybe you can find out a different way to profit from Oliveira this weekend, or maybe you'll decide to pass. If I can't find anyone to parlay with him, I'm probably going to pass as well, because I don't really want to bet a huge amount of money for a relatively small return. So that's how I feel about that fight. Not very exciting. It's chalky chalk. But at the end of the day, being the smartest guy in the bar will not help you pay the mortgage at the end of the month, but money in the bank will. And who knows, maybe Oliveira will help you put a little bit more money in the bank this weekend. And we are reverting to good old-fashioned paper at the moment, because my wife is using the iPad, so just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. No, we covered everything. Cool. Now we go on to the next fight, which is going to be Shogun against Paul Craig. Now, the reason why this fight is featuring in this very first breakdown video that I released this week is because Shogun was one of the first names that jumped out at me as a potential bet this weekend, because let's be realistic here, Paul Craig's not very good. He's not that dangerous striking. He is he basically has no offensive wrestling, and he is really sloppy and low level on the ground. And I have a theory that, if you look at Paul Craig's record, he's got lots of submission wins. Rear naked choke in his last fight against Moreira, triangle choke against Nchukwu in a fight he was getting dominated in. Triangle choke win over Ankalaev. Another fight where he was getting dominated. We saw how good Ankalaev looked this past weekend at UFC Moscow. Another submission win against Luis Henrique da Silva. All these guys have been submitted on the ground. So you're probably saying, how can you say Craig's sloppy and low level on the ground when he submitted all these guys in the UFC? But maybe I'm wrong. But I just have this theory that Paul Craig is so bad that he kind of lures people into getting complacent on the ground, and then explodes out of nowhere and catches them in a really deep, nasty submission. I think if you go back and watch the fights against Ankalaev and Nchukwu in particular, you'll see what I'm talking about, because Ankalaev and Nchukwu were cruising in these fights. They were dominating. And, you know, they took their eye off the ball for a second. Just a tiny lapse in concentration. And Craig threw those legs up and made them pay for it in a split second. Now, that's significant in this fight because Shogun has been caught in the past on the ground. Who can forget when he was submitted by Chael Sonnen in a really high-profile fight back in the day? Submitted by Forrest Griffin. Hasn't been submitted a ton of times, but even though Shogun is a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, he is still primarily a striker, and we know Craig is very, very tricky on the ground, even if, from a technical point of view, he's also very sloppy and makes tons of mistakes. But it is worth noting that, at this stage in his career, Shogun, at 37 years old, is embracing the grappling at this stage in his career, because if we check his Instagram profile, we can see that, over the last couple of years, has spent quite a bit of time training with Damian Maia. And obviously, if you go to train with Damian Maia, you're not going to be drilling, kickboxing techniques or pounding a heavy bag. You're going to be working on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So, maybe Shogun at this stage in his career realizes he can't take a shot like he used to. He has been a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt for many, many years. Maybe he is possibly going more towards the grappling aspect of the game in order to try and prolong his career. Another real good example of a fighter who's done this is Glover Teixeira. If you were to go back 4 or 5 years, you'd never see Glover grappling. He was a clinch fighter, loved the dirty box, loved to walk people down and try and box their face off. Whereas now, Glover realizes he can't take a shot like he used to, so his entire game plan surrounds getting his opponents to the ground and using his high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And we could see a similar evolution from Shogun. Who knows? Haven't seen it yet, but it's a possibility. And certainly from a technical point of view, if these guys go to the ground, Shogun's light years ahead of Craig, but so was Ankalaev, and he still got caught, and that's what concerns me. I mean, from a technical point of view, Vinicius Moreira is a much higher level than Craig on the ground, but like I say, Craig is tricky. Lures you into a false sense of security, so you get complacent, and then he catches you. But let's call this fight what it is. If we look at the odds at the moment, Shogun currently around about a 1.38 favourite, which is minus 263 for an implied probability of 72%. That means in order to be able to get any value on betting Shogun, you've got to give him around about a 70% chance of winning, which is very difficult. I'd even say impossible with a guy like Shogun. 37 years old, father time's definitely knocking on the door, can't take a shot like he used to, is a little bit chinny, and even though Paul Craig's not dangerous standing, he's still a big unit. He's 6'4" with a 76-inch reach. Big, strong, aggressive Scot. If he catches Shogun with something, he could easily knock him out. You know what I mean? Shogun definitely can't take a shot like he used to, and of course Craig's dangerous on the ground if a little sloppy. So can't cap Shogun at 77%. That's absolutely ludicrous. But if we look at the odds on Paul Craig, he is currently around about a 3.20 underdog, which is plus 220 for an implied probability of 31%. So personally, to get any value on Craig here, I believe you should be giving him a 40% chance of winning this fight. That's the personal kind of like risk to reward ratio, or the risk tolerance that I like to take on. Some people will take a lot less. It's kind of up to you, but I would recommend needing to cap Craig at around 40% before thinking about betting him. And for me, that's difficult because, let's be real, let's call an egg an egg. Let's call this fight how it is. At the end of the day, Shogun is a legend in Brazil. He's a popular Brazilian fighter, one of the most popular Brazilian fighters of all time, right? Probably top 3, Anderson Silva, Shogun, and Vanderlei Silva. It'd be tough to find 3 more popular guys than those 3, right? So it's quite obvious what the UFC are doing here. Dana White is literally like, look, find me the worst guy at light heavyweight that hasn't got a fight lined up. And Paul Craig's probably the name that got thrown into the hat. Paul Craig is being sent over to Brazil. to basically get beat up by a popular Brazilian, to give the Brazilian fans a win, to give the Brazilian fans what they want so that they can see a legend win at the tail end of his career. Now, for me, this bet is very, very similar to a bet on Alexander Volkov last week. And you guys are probably saying, oh, well, let's go bet Shogun straight away. Volkov won easily. And that's true. But just hear me out on this. What I mean by that is, for me, Craig poses enough danger, enough risk to not be able to bet Shogun. We've already said how dangerous he is. But at the same time, I'm not going to criticize anyone for betting Craig, because I do think he can catch Shogun with something. I do think he can submit him on the ground, and he's a big underdog. But I don't love it. I feel you could maybe cap Craig at 40%, but I don't think so. I don't love it. These odds probably about right. Maybe you give him a 1 in 3 chance, maybe a 35% chance. When you get to 40, I think Shogun's technical advantages, home advantage, his experience, definitely means that it's tough to get Craig into that 40 to 45% area of capping. Maybe you disagree. Like I say, I'm not going to criticize anyone for betting Paul Craig, but he's not very good, and Shogun is. It's just Shogun's body that's letting him down at this stage in his career. We know the Shogun's still got a bulletproof mentality. He'll always show up and perform to his full potential, and he's the kind of guy you have to practically kill in order to beat. So I do think he wins on Saturday night. So it's a no bet from me on that. I'm going to pass. I don't want to bet on someone as bad as Craig, and at the same time, I'm not rushing out to bet on a fragile 37-year-old fighter either. Hope you understand, but let me know in the comments what you think. It's a difficult one, right? Like I say, I'm not going to criticize anyone for betting Craig. I do think Shogun's a bad bet at the current odds, but let me know if you disagree and if I've missed anything out. I'd love to hear from you. Don't always read all the comments. Oh, sorry, that came out wrong. I don't always have time to respond to all the comments, but I read every single YouTube comment. So let me know what you think about that fight below, guys. I love reading your comments. Now we go into the final fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is one, in my opinion, of the more interesting fights on the card, especially from a betting perspective, which is strange because it's buried all the way down on the prelims, one of the first fights of the night, which, considering Raynan Barao's accolades as being, one of the most winningest UFC champions of all time. I think at one point he held the record for, most title defenses in UFC history before Demetrius Johnson smashed it. It's kind of strange to see how far Raynan Barao has fallen from the top, right? And this is one of those sports where I think, I think people are very fickle in MMA. I really do. All week, right, you'll find me in my chat room. I'm here 8, 9, 10 hours a day chatting to my members in my chat room. And just a couple of weeks ago for UFC 244, there were guys coming in all week saying things like Darren Till's chinny, Kevin Lee's washed up. The actual people were saying these things. And if we bring their records up, let's just have a little look at this. People were saying Darren Till was chinny when he's 26 years old. He's only been knocked out one time in 20 pro fights. Yes, he got dropped by Woodley, but he was only knocked out once in 20 pro fights, and people are calling Darren Till chinny and writing him off and telling me, Gaslam's going to knock him out. And of course, if we look back at the betting results from that night, where are they? How could you not bet Darren Till as such a big underdog? Of course, we made a video about it, all the reasons why Till was such a great bet at these odds. But people were quick to assume Darren Till was chinny, an exceptionally talented 26-year-old fighter, just because he got knocked out once in a high-profile fight. And guys were also saying Kevin Lee was washed up. People saying Kevin Lee washed up. Those are the words they were using. Kevin Lee, a supremely talented 27-year-old fighter who's nowhere near his prime, and people were saying he was washed up because of a few tough losses, a few difficult performances against some of the best fighters in the world. So I really feel like MMA fans are really fickle. Now, Raynan Barao is one of those cases where people are writing Barao off and they're saying he's shot and he's past it and he's done and he's washed up and his career's over. And Raynan Barao, when people were saying these things about Darren Till and Kevin Lee a few weeks back, I would argue with them and I would call them fools and tell them they don't know what they're talking about, because Lee and Till are two young, hungry, talented, up-and-coming beasts still trying to find their way in the highest level of the sport. And of course they're going to get career setbacks. It's like in football, right? If a team goes and loses 2-3 games in a row, you don't suddenly say like, that's it, they're finished, they're over, they're done. But in MMA, you get 2-3 losses in a row, people start saying you're done, you're washed up, you're past it, you're finished. It's crazy to me. And when it comes to this fight, when it comes to this guy, Raynan Barao, I can see why people are saying he's done, 100%. So I'm not disputing that he might be done. Like, I would fucking argue with anyone that Till and Lee still had huge futures in the sport before they showed that they actually did at UFC 244. But with Barao, I think it's 50-50. He might be done. He might have just had a blip and a bad patch in his career. Because realistically, yes, if you're wiki capping this fight, which many people that bet on MMA do, many casuals just look at win-loss records and form their opinions based on that. And if you're wiki capping this fight, it looks terrible. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's 1-6. He's only won one fight in his last 7. On paper, it looks bad. But look at who those losses have come against. TJ Dillashaw, one of the best fighters in the world. Jeremy Stephens, no picnic for anyone. Philippe Nova, tough guy. Aljamain Sterling, beast. Brian Kelleher, decent fighter. Andre Ewell has looked outstanding recently, particularly in his fight against Marlon Vera. And Luke Sanders. You know, Sanders is decent. You know, I'm sure if Andrade would have fought guys like Ewell, Sterling, Stephens, Dillashaw, he would have picked up losses as well. So this is a tough one for me because it's absolutely undeniable that Raynan Barao has looked poor in some of his recent fights. So, for example, slowed down big time against Brian Kelleher, couldn't get any respect with his shots in this fight. Also slowed down against Andre Ewell and slowed down against Aljamain Sterling. But there were moments, particularly the first half of the fight, where he looked great against Aljamain Sterling and Andre Ewell before his cardio and output fell off a cliff. So when it comes to a guy like Barao, I'm really not sure what to think, because we look at Barao, a guy with over 40 pro fights, and he's had tons of miles on the clock, right? He's got tons of miles on the clock. It's no doubt about it. But he is still only 32 years old. And yes, I know he's taken a lot of damage, particularly in those Dillashaw fights. But he is still young in his career. And it's not like we haven't seen guys run into poor periods of form like this and then turn their career around. You know, one of the most high-profile examples I can think of is Andrei Arlovski. You know, there was a point in time where a strong gust of wind would be enough to knock Arlovski out. And of course, we've seen him get his career back on track and put a decent record together in the heavyweight division. Possibly not the best example because you've all just got fresh memories of Rosenstruck death shot in him. But there was a period in Arlovski's career where it was really bad. You know, Jeremy Stephens had a period in his career where he struggled really bad, and he's kind of had a mini career resurgence over the last 2 or 3 years. So maybe Barao's done, maybe he's not. And I feel that whenever it comes to betting on MMA, it's very important to approach everything with an open mind and not to dismiss any theory. So there will be two camps of people when it comes to a guy like Raynan Barao. There will be people that are like, he's done, he's past it, he's chinny, his cardio shot, USADA wrecked his career, he'll never be the same again, he's a bum. There will be that camp. And then there will be the other camp, with probably not as many people in it, guys like me. Or actually, no, I don't fit into that camp. I sit in the middle. But there will be another camp that's like, Raynan Barao, one of the greatest bantamweights of all time. amazing UFC champion, one of those winningest UFC champions of all time. He's brilliant. This is just a career blip. And I just sit somewhere in the middle. Now, for the camp that is writing Barao off, I would just advise you to take an open-minded approach to Barao and any aspect of MMA betting, because you know what they say, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. And during this time in 2018, where it really started to become clear that Barao had hit a real sticky patch in his career, Barao made the huge decision to move from Rio de Janeiro, where he trained at Nova União for his entire career since just a young guy. He moved his entire life and his career to Florida to train full-time at American Top Team. And this is huge, man. I mean, you think about it. This guy is born, grown up, lived and trained in Rio his whole career, and now he moves his entire life over to a new country, a new city, a new gym to trust new training partners, new coaches. It's a big move, man. It's a big step. And I don't know if Barao is done. I don't know if it's just a blip and he's going to get his career back on track. But what I do know is when a fighter moves their family and their entire life to a new country to try and get their career back on track, it's a sign that they're very committed and they're taking things very seriously. And I also know that the guys at ATT are very well equipped to help Barao get his career back on track. Very, very fucking well equipped. In fact, if a fighter was struggling and you wanted to send them to any gym in the country to help them get their career back on track, ATT would be top of that list. And if you have got some spare time this week and you want a real life example of how a struggling fighter can get their career back on track with new coaches, new tactics, new game planning, and a new leash of life, I strongly recommend that you go back and watch some of Claudia Gadea's fights. And Claudia actually has something in common with Reynan Barao, because it's become a bit of a, or at least amongst the members of my website and me, I've talked about this as well, but it's become a bit of a well-known thing that since USADA came into effect, all the high-level guys, the top guys that trained at Nova União, their careers have fallen off a cliff. If you think about it, before USADA came into effect, Junior Dos Santos was one of the top dogs at heavyweight. Claudia Gadea was one of the top dogs at strawweight. Reynan Barao was one of the top dogs at bantamweight. And we also had Jose Aldo, top dog at featherweight. And of course, other guys like Johnny Eduardo was doing well. Hackman Diaz was crushing it in the lightweight division. But when USADA came into effect, everyone at Nova União started to do badly. No one did good at Nova União, and no one did better at Nova União after USADA came into effect. Something happened which hit that camp hard when USADA came in. It couldn't have been a coincidence. But if you want to have a look at how a fighter can get their career back on track, go and watch some of Claudia Gadea's past fights over the last few years. Go and watch how quickly she gassed out against Jessica Andrade, how sloppy her striking looked and how bad her cardio looked against Carla Esparza. Go look at how bad her cardio looked against Nina Ansarov. Then go and watch her performance against Randa Marcos, how disciplined she fought, how she stuck to a game plan. And that was because after leaving Nova União, she travelled around multiple different gyms. She was a bit of a nomad. She went everywhere from Jackson's to all over the place. Extreme Couture in Vegas to try and find a new home. And that's what led to these poor performances. But then she went and trained with Mark Henry in New York, guys like Frankie Edgar, guys like Marlon Moraes, guys like Eddie Alvarez. She found a base, she found a home, she found, world-class training partners, top-level coaches, and completely turned her career around in just one fight. It looked completely different in the Randa Marcos fight. You go watch her performance against Randa Marcos compared to Esparza or Ansarov, it's like looking at a different person. And it's important to bear that in mind when we look at a guy like Reynan Barao, because on the surface, if you're wiki capping this fight, if you're looking at some of his recent performances, which were poor against Kelleher, Sterling, you could easily write him off. But I'm not willing to stick a fork in it yet, is basically what I'm trying to say. You've got to keep an open mind that Barao really might have made big improvements moving to ATT. Certainly has the technical ability in all areas. Very high level striker, very strong wrestler, very high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. And let's be real, if we're considering the challenge that Douglas Andrade brings to the table, not a really difficult challenge, if I'm being honest with you, in terms of the skills that he brings to the table. He doesn't really have very good takedown defense. He is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but of course there are different levels of black belt, and Barao is just light years ahead of him on the ground. And in terms of striking, he is aggressive. He does hit very hard, but he's a single shot fighter. It's not like he's going to be able to apply loads of pressure on Barao, throw a wide range of strikes, throw kicks, elbows, knees, throw combinations. This is a single shot fighter. He comes forward, right hook, come forward, jab, come forward, right hook. It's basic stuff. He hits hard, but it's nothing like scary, is what I'm trying to say. Now, the one major thing that is important to pay attention to here, if we look at the current betting odds, we have got, where are we? Reynan Barao is currently around about a 3.0 underdog, which is plus 200 for an implied probability of 33%. So the odds are decent, right? To get any value there on Barao, you'd want to cap him like 40-45%. You get a decent margin there over the bookie. If we're looking at Andrade, currently around about 1.42, which is minus 238 for an implied probability of 70%. So to get any value on Andrade, you've got to give him around about a 75% chance of winning. Now, with this fight, it's difficult for me to get to 75% on Andrade. I did research this fight before any other this weekend, because for me, Douglas Andrade was the first name that jumped out at me. I thought he would be a great bet. I had memories in my head of Barao looking very poor against Ewell and very poor against Sanders. And I thought, you know what, Andrade is a strong, powerful, athletic guy, very tough, decent cardio for 3 rounds. He's going to cause Barao a big problem. And maybe this will be a nice, easy money bet where we can fire big aggressively and take down a nice profit. But when I started researching it, Andrade was quite basic, to be honest. Not that scary. But what Andrade does have in this fight, which is a huge advantage over Barao, is toughness and durability. There is absolutely no doubt that Andrade is extremely tough. He's got a granite chin. He's the kind of guy you have to practically kill in order to finish. And in contrast, Barao is starting to look a little bit shot-worn. I mean, Luke Sanders is not a guy that has ever been known for his knockout power. He's predominantly a grappler, and he absolutely death-shotted Reynan Barao in round 2. And what was most concerning about this fight for me was that the writing was kind of on the wall from the first round. If you go back and watch this fight, it surprised me how bad Barao's striking defense was. He was moving very well. He was looking very technical. He was very light on his feet. He was posturing. But he just ate a lot of clean, hard shots in this fight, particularly very early on in round 2. And then eventually Sanders snuck the shot through, which sat him down, and he finished the fight off with ground and pound. But the point I'm trying to make is Sanders is kind of like a pillow-fisted grappler, right? He's not dangerous with his hands at all. And he death-shotted Barao. Now, Andrade might not be that technical, but you can see from the way he carries himself, from his physique, the way he stalks his opponents, the way he loads up on his single shots, that he does hit very hard. And if Barao gets dropped by a pillow-fisted grappler like Luke Sanders, you could bet your ass that if Andrade connects, Barao's going to be in big trouble. And for me, that's what makes it very, very difficult to bet Barao, even as a big underdog. I love to bet high-risk gambles. We bet, Darren Till, we showed you earlier on in this video, was a great high-risk gamble that paid off. And we've had a few decent high-risk gambles this month that have paid off. So, Barao is the kind of guy I would consider taking a gamble on. But the fact that Sanders put him away so easily, the fact that, you know, Brian Kelleher was able to inflict so much damage to him, you know, another relatively low-level striker, is a huge concern. And Andrade hits like a truck, and it's very unlikely that Barao is going to be able to finish Andrade. So if Barao is going to win, it's going to have to be by decision. By the time you factor crazy judging in and all that kind of thing, the proposition of rolling the dice on Barao becomes a little bit less enticing. So I'm not interested in a bet on Barao because I don't trust his chin, and I don't think, because of his chin and the way he's looked in his last few fights, makes it a particularly good deal to bet him at this kind of implied probability. But at the same time, I'm not betting out to rush out to bet on Douglas Andrade, because, you know, his current odds mean you'd have to cap him at around 75% to win. And for me, Barao is still a big unknown. I'm not willing to write him off yet, because he could turn his career around at ATT. He's still young enough to do it. And yes, he has shown all the fighters of, you know, all the signs of, you know, being completely shot. But what I do know is when you reach the highest level of anything in life, which Raynon Barao has, he was at one point the greatest bantamweight in the world for a very long period of time. Whenever you reach that level, you reach that level because you become incredibly good at learning from your mistakes and evolving and improving. And because of the amazing things Barao was able to achieve when he was champion, I absolutely know that he has got it in his heart and in his DNA to turn his career around. Whether he can do it physically, whether his body will allow him to do it, is another story. But at least he's making the correct career choices by moving his family and his life to Florida to train at the best MMA gym in the world at American Top Team. That's pretty much all I want to say about that fight. Look, I know I haven't given you any bets in this video, and, you know, many of you will be frustrated by that and it's super boring, but I just haven't found any. I will keep digging. I will try to share a bet with you in the next video if we do another one of these. If you would like me to put out another one of these videos featuring the fight between Jan Blachowicz and Ronaldo Jacare Souza, you know what to do. Hit the like button right now. We need 350 likes to make that video happen. But, you know, all the same, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you appreciate where I'm coming from with these fights. And if you did, please leave a comment below and let me know what you think. You know, what did you like about the breakdowns today? What did you agree with? What did you disagree with? Anything I missed out? What do you think I could do better? Let me know. I love reading your comments, guys. And with that, that's it for today's video. I'm going to fly off now to Twitch and break down this Bellator 234 card. Don't forget to check me out on Twitch. I'll leave a link in the description below if you'd like to join in those live research sessions. Please give it a go, guys. We have a lot of fun over there. Twitch is a hell of a lot better for live streaming than YouTube, I promise you that. I didn't realise how great it was until I was forced to go over there, but now, much better than YouTube. So give it a try, guys. And with that, going to be the end for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Take care. I love all of you, and I'll be back very, very soon with another video. So take care, guys, and I hope you have a great week.